Well, hey, Becca.
Hey.
So happy that we get to be here, get to do this.
Yeah.
So the three of us have a group chat in the day-to-day called Rip It, RIP It, which segues perfectly into our conversation today, which is about death.
Mm-hmm.
And when we first approached the topic, it seemed very strange for an organization born out of suicide to sit and reflect on death in this way. And the more I thought about it, and the more Indy and I talked about it, the more we realized that our shared conversations around the subject and all the work you've done on the subject is actually something that can bring people a lot of comfort. And I think the interesting dynamic around death is that for all of the things that we worry about in the day-to-day, death is the only thing that we are absolutely certain will happen in our lives. And what I'd love to start on is if you want to take a moment to reflect on kind of where your interest in death as a subject of reflection started and kind of how your life has changed since you started on that journey.
Yeah, I was predisposed to deep inquiry because my mom taught me how to meditate before I could ride a bike. So born truth seeker, super curious, and then fast forward 2 decades and my dad passed, and that was, early enough for it to be rare. Like no one had lost a parent at that stage, and so no one had a guidebook for that. And I was old enough to realize, like, oh shit, yeah, I'm never gonna see this person again, and that's really painful. Like in this like physical world, that's fucking painful. But meanwhile, I had been like meditating, preparing myself for this for 2 decades.
Without
so
knowing it.
I'm like, damn, I'm still a kid, but like I've been training for this. And from the moment, it was interesting because a lot of people said, wow, you're not grieving, right? And they were like, you're just a little too happy and you're a little too celebratory. And I remember thinking the night that my dad passed, everyone else was sitting at home crying, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna go out and play the softball game, and I'm gonna go win that game, and I'm gonna go fucking kill it on the field, because that's what he would want me to do. He wouldn't want me to sulk. And I always looked at it as like, wow, what a gift to experience everyone's greatest fear so early in life, because wow, I have nothing to lose. And everything became a luxury. Someone would be like, wow, look at this gossip, or like, look at this stain on my shirt. And I'm like, damn, how relative that is, because I've lost my dad.
I feel the same way. No one could pick up the phone and call me and give me worse news than I've already gotten. So go for it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. There was some serious freedom in that. And I think freedom is probably the one-word description of coming really close to death and like getting really comfortable with death. It's like the closest that I think you can get to freedom in the physical form.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting to imagine being at that exact age to navigate it as a child, where you are still a child, but you are also aware. People go through something when they're 4, 5, 6. You were kind of at the perfect age to be able to acknowledge it without necessarily having the tools yet to process it.
Yeah, that's right.
And so what has it been like, kind of being handed something that you have to hold on to forever, as grief is, and you have to process in increments kind of as time goes on, because you didn't have the tools when it happened.
Yeah, growth is certainly not linear. Yeah, it's interesting because my dad, as an archetype, he would yell at me if I cried. And so he was like, I just want you to be the strongest woman. And so then, of course, I'd never seen him cry my entire life. And then when he was on the deathbed, he started crying. And I was like taken back. I was like, oh my God, I've never seen this before. And it was so interesting to have a clear understanding of what strong meant, i.e. the
Traditional,
repression of emotion, in his words. And then see him on his deathbed when there is just nothing left, no barriers left. Physically, mentally, spiritually, he just had nothing left. And so finally the emotions came through and I looked at him and I was like, damn, I've never seen you so strong. And that's when things really shifted for me. And I started to allow emotion for the first time. And I started having deeper connections with myself, with other people, deeper understanding of life. And that was also really meaningful.
Nothing changes your relationships with people you love and people you care about quite like death, especially when it comes either at an unexpected point in life or unexpectedly, very suddenly. And watching those relationships shift can bring really beautiful relationships into your life. Do you have a specific relationship dynamic that shifted in your life because of death?
Yeah, I think it catapulted me to a new level, a new capacity to love. And it made so much space for the human experience that I was like, I will only allow these relationships, the people who have been through something, who can meet me where I am. Because if you haven't been through something, you won't be able to hold the human capacity with me.
Yeah.
And we won't be able to go there and explore these things. And so I started to look for people who had gone through things and created wholeness from it. Because, you know, there's kind of two forks in the road when you go through a lot of pain. You can, it can create chaos or it can create freedom. And thankfully, because I had been training for 2 decades, it created freedom for me. And so that's why I'm really focused in my work to try to create freedom, and knowing that it's all that inner game. It's like, how can we create that freedom for people when they have that fork in the road?
It's giving other people the opportunity that I consider myself in the same boat, where I was handed this thing to hold on to in grief, and I had the tools for it.
Yeah.
So many people get handed grief with no idea what to do with it because you can't prepare for it.
Yeah.
And then it shifts all of your relationships. And like you said, it showed you this capacity. I mean, what is, just in terms of scale and expansiveness, grief is the most incredible feeling.
Yeah.
And it's often the product of death. You don't have to, grief doesn't only happen when something dies. Something can leave your life, a time can change, whatever it is. But you just feel this gigantic thing, and it's almost like this radical sense of gratitude in a way, where you step back from it and you're just like, I am grateful that I get to feel the absolute capacity of my emotions.
Yeah, I heard this quote, paraphrasing and putting into a few words as possible: grief is unexpressed love. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, that's nice.
I was like, holy shit, that's it. That's it. And if I can find ways to express that love in new and exciting ways, then things continue to move through me versus repressing that love.
Well, if you visualize energy as like a thing that you can put somewhere, right? Like your emotions, you need somewhere to put it. And like you said, that's how it becomes unexpressed love. Because you say, we were just having an awesome conversation with our friend Eric about it. His dad, who passed away suddenly, used to call people when they would get in the car. And when he wants to call his dad, he does what his dad would have done, and he calls other people. And it's a little bit like that. It gives you a new relationship with the person.
Yeah.
Through experiencing this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
What was you mentioned like kind of your relationship with your emotions when your dad was alive, and like how strength was sort of this like very like hardening type of strength. And I kind of have 2 questions. One is like, what did it feel like starting to embrace strength actually being more of like a softening? And also, did that happen with other emotions or quality, like your perception changing as you're in this grieving process?
Yeah, so strength felt like numbness. I thought that I was strong because I was like, I have evolved feeling. And Stoicism talks a lot about the evolution of the human spirit being above emotion. But we were even talking about that the other day. And it's actually the idea that emotion shouldn't last more than 60 seconds. And it's just this great, knock, knock, like this is a messenger, feelings are a messenger. And when we allow things to come in, we can respond in a certain way, which is incredible. But then when we hang on to an emotion and we attach to it and we say, I am sad or I am angry, and then we create there can be thousands upon thousands, millions of thoughts from one single emotion. And then it's built so much into a narrative that you don't even remember the original feeling that now I walk this way, and maybe I even limp this way, and all of a sudden I love this way. And it's incredible what happens if you take a feeling and you run with it instead of just allowing it to be. And so I've been thinking a lot about emptiness. And I told one of my girlfriends, I have 2 intentions for the year. One is emptiness. And she was like, emptiness, that's so negative. And I was like, really? I was like, emptiness to me is just the ground state of receiving life rather than having to take on the addiction that humans have to label everything. And I was like, ooh, that's a tree. Ooh, this person's bad for me. Ooh, this is cold. Yum, yuck. It's like the yum, yuck effect. And so the second intention I have this year is this getting rid of righteousness. And really what that is like owning my bias and just being like, oh my God, like, let's not take so seriously the fact that I think this is good or bad, because who the fuck says what's good and bad?
And this can change a month from now or a year from now. Like something you hate today could be something that you fall in love with 3 years from now.
Yeah, like olives. Olives, I was really trying. I was like, olives are so sophisticated. Like if I could just like olives, I'd be so elevated. And it took me years, but like I like olives now. Look at me now.
Yeah, she's an olive girl.
Look at me now. Make it dirty.
It's really interesting because with the Charlie Fund, we talk so much about labels, as a tool, and telling people to label your emotions. And it's what's so interesting about it as a subject, because it's equally healthy to not label them.
That's right.
But I think the beginning point of it for a lot of people is that label. And accepting that you can label it and change it is the thing.
That's interesting. I feel like labeling is our humanness trying to understand. Take the 27 letters, make it into words. We were built to do this so that we can communicate and create connection, yet it's keeping us from really going deep. Because once you call it a tree, you've lost the true magic of what it really is. And that's the emptiness that you come back to. And notice when you want to label something and just say, rather than me saying what life is, how can I just receive what's coming in through sensations?
Well, and that's what's interesting to bring it back to death, is it's an experience that we never get a chance to label.
Yeah, we're scared.
Scared. You don't get to, you don't experience death.
Right.
It happens.
Yeah, and it's happening in every moment. And so
Yes.
we had this divine intervention that allows us to look at the physical death very early. Yet there are many deaths, the death of this moment, and even the death of the feeling that we were just talking about, allowing the death of a feeling to, the lifespan of a feeling to be 60 seconds, and to honor that and be like, wow, look at this sadness. This sucks. And allow myself to cry and then re-regulate like my nervous system. What a beautiful thing that tears come to regulate your nervous system. It's all so beautiful, yet we overcomplicate life and we try to make these narratives because they're so comforting.
Why do you think they're comforting?
We love to know because it's the opposite of certainty, which it would be so badass if this entire conversation comes back to certainty, because there is no greater freedom in certainty. And the ground state of spirituality is comfort in uncertainty. There's so much unknown. Yet as soon as we say, I'm going to keep saying the frickin' tree, but I look at a tree and I say, as soon as I say that's a tree, I'm like, oh, it's a tree. I'm good. And if I was to say, wow, look at the green and the multitude of the way that it goes in the wind and the way that it makes me feel. And it's like, for a lot of people, that is scary. not knowing is scary. And so we put a label on it. It quells our fears. And we're like, okay, we can move on now. But with death, we can't put our finger on it.
It's the only certainty that we run away from.
Yeah.
You know, so many people run towards certainty every chance they get. Death is the one certainty that people say, oh no, I'm good there.
Yeah.
I think I'd love to reflect for a second on the idea of death in others versus in self. And I think we've talked a lot about grief as an idea of, you know, like when somebody dies, what you experience. But so much of people's anxiety around death is around their own death. And so for you in these practices that you've helped create and all this work that you've done to bring this dialogue out, how do you communicate to people the idea of acceptance and of peace with their own death?
Yeah, it comes back to the micro deaths. It's like this state of constant impermanence. And when you're doing, let's call it like a body scan, or, you know, if you go on a Vipassana retreat, you are studying the coming and going of sensations. And you're like, look at that. When I was deep in a sound ceremony, my guide said, watch this. Look at all this fear. That. And then I started feeling like kind of angry, and they're like, that. And to think it's that simple to just observe the coming and going and allow and celebrate the coming and going, to allow for the emptiness, to allow for more and more potential. It's like it's being okay with impermanence, celebrating it, and just getting still enough to notice that there is nothing more you can count on than something coming and then going.
There's a quote from, I'm going to butcher the name, but Pema Chodron.
Oh, yeah.
We write all of these names all the time and never
She's
actually
great.
read them aloud.
Yeah.
The quote is, impermanence is a principle of harmony. When we don't struggle against it, we are in harmony with reality. And I think that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Is the labels and the certainty and the permanence all coming back to what you're talking about.
Yeah, one of my favorite concepts is that pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice, and how pain will come. But it's like the feeling that turns into 1,000 thoughts. It's like the pain is going to create expansion in our body so that we can hold more and more. And the capacity to fear and pain is only building on our capacity to love and feel joy, because that's the nature of the universe. It demands this balance and this non-dual structure of being able to feel that humanness. You know, we came here to experience those extremes. And when I've gotten personally the closest to my death, it was this peace in equanimity, this peace in neutrality, this, you know, immune to flattery, immune to criticism, like immune to the greatest extremes that are available to us. How can we, you know, dip our toes into it and then always come back to the middle path? Because greatest serenity is the mix of all of the greatest extremes.
It's gray. It's perfectly gray. Rather than being a black or white or, you know, good or bad. Like there is like a freeness when you take the labels away or take the lens, you know, colored lens off.
I feel like all the colors together are what? Are they black or is it brown?
That's like you know, we talked a lot today and in all these conversations around deciding to be vulnerable in spaces to be vulnerable. You get thrown into vulnerability a lot too.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
You know, and I think like, to bring it back to something different, I think a lot of times when people are putting on seatbelts and looking both ways, I think they're almost more afraid of suffering or pain than they are death.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things I was thinking about coming here was like, what are people actually scared of?
It's not getting hit by the car and lights go out. It's stuck in a hospital with 2 broken legs. And it's like you said, like, I don't want to live anymore.
Yeah.
That's a product of pain, not death.
Right. And also, even if you're not feeling the physical pain, what are you actually scared of? It's just scared of not knowing. It's like none of us actually know what's going to happen. And the more I've studied the idea that there is a greater soul journey. There is a reason why everything happens the way it does. The book Many Lives, Many Masters, and where this
Let's
this psychiatrist.
Have you read that book too?
Oh,
Sick.
yeah,
Becca
yeah.
recommended it.
I was
Oh,
like,
nice.
please, we cannot connect until you read this book. And it's incredible. It's like the ultimate synist sits down with these patients who are having symptoms that are not curable by traditional
Western medicine.
And they're like, let's take a left turn with hypnotherapy. Hypnotherapy turns into past life regression before his eyes, and all of a sudden people are living these past lives and experiencing the in-between life experience, and all of a sudden there are no symptoms anymore. And you hear it again and again and again, and you start to think, damn, like maybe there is something bigger. And this is why religion was so useful, is because there's this vessel that when you have this greater certainty and faith, then you feel like, wow, I better take care of this thing that I was given. And it's okay. Like everything here is just showing me how to be a better version of this thing, whatever this thing is. And there's a lot of beautiful secular practices. There's secular wisdom that starts to connect all this greatest wisdom, and it does all come back to certainty. Like how can I be absolutely certain that everything that happens to me is good and is showing me what to change? And that's something like that line is on my wallpaper. I look at it every single day. And I would say the first step to liberation, freedom in this is emptiness. Receiving life and not labeling it, allowing it to happen, and then having certainty beyond logic. In those moments where it's like, damn, this doesn't make sense because we're trying to make sense of everything. How can I lose the need to make sense of it? And be so fucking certain that this is exactly how it should be. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, all this bullshit doesn't have a hold on me anymore.
How do you do that? How do you like?
That's
I'm not asking for myself. I already know the
Indigo's
answer.
like this whole thing. Indigo's like, so how does that work?
Well, because it's like I think about when I was like a kid, a teenager, and like I think I was too. I feel like I adopted that mindset very easily, where I was like, it's going to happen for a reason. It's going to work out. I'm going to be fine. And like, I was too young to know any better. I was like, this is just like how I'm going to get through this, is just knowing that eventually time's going to pass and I'm not going to be right here. And I think the older I've gotten, the more I feel more aware of all the possible outside factors could actually could put me in a really uncomfortable or force me into vulnerability when I don't want to go there. And I don't know, I think you're just you're quieting a lot of the past data points that can in your head. And I'm just curious, like, how do you, in those moments where it's like, okay, I have a lot of proof that this might really suck. Like,
When it gets loud, how do you shut that down?
Yeah. How do you drown it out with that certainty?
That's the subtext of this conversation, is all of this is incredibly correct in idea. And I think it's very difficult for a lot of people to get there.
Yes.
And what that bridge is.
Yeah, I remain in a state of curiosity. I usually ask myself, why is this in my movie? Like, why is this in my little illusion? I also have this thing that I do when I'm trying to almost personify the negative spirit thoughts in my head. And I'm like, oh, Becca, that's my chair. She's sitting in my office chair. Go push her out of it. That's mine. And
well, so internal family systems happening.
That's right. Yeah. And so, to not take it so seriously, to laugh. Laughter has just been the best medicine. So it's like between like humor and curiosity, I'm able to say, okay, this sucks. And why is it in my movie? What can I make of it? And so if some shit thing happens, I'm like, okay, first of all, what's the truth in this? Like, how can this help me? There's something here for me. And at the end of the day, that's just going to be giving you the agency back, rather than being like, oh, poor me. It's like, oh, okay, I get to make myself better. I mean, I'm obsessed with like optimization. So I'm like, oh, I can be better from this shitty situation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I also heard this great story. I think it's biblical. And it was like, all right, Indy is going down into their body. Everyone, come close. They're like, all right, who loves Indy? bunch of people raise their hand. They're like, great, you're going to be Max. And you're going to be the teacher that taught them the best shit that they've ever heard. And they're like, all right, come closer. Who really, really loves Indy? And they're like, great, you are going to be the person that broke their heart. You are going to be the cop that, you know, gives them a ticket. And it's like the idea that in this story, in this narrative, in this illusion that we call life, the people that push us to our limits are the people that create opportunities for our evolution. And if we can have the greatest gratitude for those moments that we feel like we've found our edge, we know that something great is on the other side. And so it just, the reframing, it's like it's all a choice. And sometimes it can feel really masochistic and really good to be like, this sucks, this hurts, this was painful. And there's a time and place for that, because at the end of the day, you don't want to spiritually bypass anything. You want to let it rise, and you want to let it release.
Awesome.
Thank you, Becca.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
Becca.
We did it.